What if the greatest love story ever told wasn't between warriors or kings, but between two old people in a crumbling cottage who simply refused to close their door? The night was thick and starless when two cloaked figures materialized on the hillside path leading into the village. No one had seen them arrive. No one knew where they had come from. But door after door swung open and shut in their faces. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Bolts slid into place. The village had made its decision. These strangers were someone else's problem. There was only one door left. It belonged to a thatched shack, so small and weathered, it seemed to lean against the hillside for support. Baucis and Philemon, an elderly couple who had shared that humble roof for decades, answered the knock without hesitation. They didn't ask who the visitors were, or where they'd come from, or what misfortune had brought them to a stranger's door in the dark. They simply stepped aside and said, "Come in." That gesture, quiet, unremarkable, utterly human, would change everything. Inside, Baucis coaxed the dying embers back to life with the practiced tenderness of someone who had done it 1,000 times. The cottage filled with warmth. Philemon pulled out the only chairs they owned. The couple had been young once, full of dreams, when they first fell in love and settled into this little home. The years had bent their backs and thinned their purses, but they had never thinned their hearts. Decades later, they still moved around each other with the unhurried ease of two people who have long since memorized each other's rhythms, reaching past without bumping, finishing each other's sentences, sharing the last of what they had without keeping score. And tonight, they had very little: a pot of vegetables, a wobbly table that Baucis steadied with a chip of broken clay, then scrubbed with fresh mint until it smelled like a garden, a wine jug, a shank of aging meat that Philemon carved into strips quietly so their guests wouldn't notice the sacrifice it represented. They made a feast out of almost nothing. But then, something strange began to happen. As the evening wore on, and their guests drank deeply from the old clay vessel, the wine never ran out. Baucis refilled her own cup and stared at it. Philemon caught her eye across the table. The color drained from their faces. These were not ordinary travelers. In ancient Greek tradition, xenia, the sacred duty of hospitality towards strangers, was no mere courtesy. It was a divine law. And the gods themselves were known to walk among mortals in disguise, testing whether humans still honored it. Baucis and Philemon had heard the stories. Now, cold with awe and fear, they realized they were living one. They searched the cottage in a panic, desperate to offer something worthy of gods. The only thing of value they had left was their goose, the old bird who guarded their door like a sentinel. They chased it around the cottage, lunging and stumbling, too old and tired to catch it, until they had to stop, breathless and frightened, and simply await their fate. The strangers rose. Their traveling cloaks fell away. The firelight seemed to bow in their presence. Standing before the trembling couple was Zeus, sovereign of Olympus, master of storms, and Hermes, his quicksilver son, guide of souls, messenger between worlds. The gods had walked through that village, testing every heart, and only two had passed. "You showed us true xenia," they said, "loving hospitality, freely given, not because you knew who we were, but precisely because you did not. The couple was commanded to follow. Together, they climbed the nearest mountain, and near the summit, when they turned to look back at their home, the village was gone. In its place, a dark, silent swamp. Zeus had swallowed the town whole, punishment for its locked doors and cold hearts. Baucis and Philemon wept for their neighbors, their grief unashamed even in the presence of gods. Below them, their little shack shuddered and transformed. The rotting thatch became marble. The crooked walls straightened into colonnades. Carved legends spread across the doors like ivy. The crumbling cottage they had loved and held together with broken clay and mint leaves had become a temple, gleaming, eternal, magnificent. Hermes turned to them gently. "Is there anything you wish for?" The couple spoke quietly together, the way people do who have shared a life long enough to need very few words. Then Philemon looked up. "Let us tend this temple," he said, "and when our time comes, let us go together. Neither of us should have to live in a world where the other is not." The gods granted it. For many more years, they lived and loved inside that gleaming temple, caring for it and for each other. Until one morning, Baucis looked down and saw leaves spiraling from Philemon's fingers. He looked at her hands. Bark was already climbing her wrists. They reached for each other. They held on. The roots took hold, and the branches rose, and the vines twined upward as two voices faded into the rustle of leaves. Where an old man and an old woman had stood, two trees now grew, a linden and an oak, their branches woven together overhead, inseparable. The village that turned away strangers was swallowed by darkness and forgotten. But the trees on the hillside, the ones whose branches never stopped touching, those people remembered for centuries. Because in the end, it was not the gods who were the most powerful thing in this story. It was the two ordinary people who answered the door.